3, 2, 1, end of test. Keying with a go.
Well, hello there and welcome to segment 2 of our outing at Edwards Air Force Base. We think you're going to love it. Stay with this video. Well, Fred Bell here at the coolest test flight school ever, although Silas might get upset with me about that, the Navy guys at Pax River, but you got to pinch yourself, and I'm standing in this room with all of this history and really the cradle of flight test, right? Going back to Yeager and Boyd and all those folks. And I'm here with Demon. Now, Demon, that's a great call sign, by the way.
It is.
That's your parents, you were not a terrible child.
I was not a terrible child. My test pilot school classmates were very loving and
yes.
Gentle in naming me.
Yes, I know all about that naming thing, and scary stuff. Now, you have kind of an interesting path into the Air Force. You were ROTC.
I was.
And you were actually here at Edwards.
Yep, that was my first assignment.
That's very cool. And then not really thinking about the Air Force, but along the line, the bug bit you.
Oh, yeah. Like, I've always been interested in airplanes just ever since I can remember. Both my parents served in the Air Force at one point or the other, and so I've always we've gone and visited Air Force bases. I remember they took me to the Air Force Museum in Ohio when I was a kid. Apparently, I passed out on the way there and just fell asleep through the whole thing. But then we went back later, and I actually did enjoy going through all the different hangars there as well.
That is probably one of the greatest museums ever.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's so cool. Now, you kind of went along a progression and then went to Embry-Riddle.
Yeah, so after high school, I was still interested in aircraft, so I was like, let's go to aerospace engineering and design aircraft. And I ended up going to Embry-Riddle in Prescott, Arizona, cool. Getting my bachelor's in aerospace engineering, and I ended up doing ROTC there as well, just because I was interested in the Air Force still. And then by the time I graduated, it was like, hey, this is a really good job opportunity. Let's do this for 4 or 5 years. That's what our commitment was at the time. And then go there until I get bored of it. And I'm still here, so I have not yet gotten bored of it.
You're not bored. Well, how did you tell me about the flight test bug and how you got involved in flight tests, that kind of progression.
So that was a little bit of a fluke. So my first assignment was here to Edwards. I liked the desert where I went to school in Arizona. So I was like, yeah, I'll just put this on my dream sheet. And I found out pretty much if you put Edwards, you're going to get it because it is a little bit of a remote base. But it was very fortunate for me. I ended up getting assigned to the F-35 test squadron doing flight controls and flying qualities testing. So testing how the aircraft maneuvers through the air, how it feels to the pilot. What I didn't realize, there's a long legacy of handling qualities testing that's been done here and just everywhere throughout the Air Force, and really developing aircraft from basic pulleys and cables up through hydraulic flight controls and now into the digital flight control era. So as I learned over the course of a couple of years, I was very interested in learning how do airplanes fly and how can I make them fly better and make it easier for the pilot to focus on other things in their mission.
It's ironic you talk about fly-by-wire and all the progression because we're standing in front of a good old slide roll, which most kids, and you're not a kid, by the way, but most kids now don't have any idea what that is.
They don't, but it's still on our patch. It's still on every graduate patch and on the TPS school patch as a reminder of just that analysis of where this has started. Started back in the good old slide roll days, and we're still using similar techniques even to this day.
Do you go through a horror class where you make them use the slide roll?
We don't. We're not that mean. We're not that mean.
That's not a fun thing to use. It's actually quite difficult. So let's talk about when you're flying one of these aircraft and you're in flight test, and there's a certain amount of unknown, right? Correct. How do you manage let's talk about, a cycle. You're going out, you're going to take the airplane out. In your mind, what are you thinking about when you go out and do that? Obviously the mission, But is it unnerving? Is it not unnerving? What's the emotions that you go through?
I think there's a healthy amount of anxiety. So as a flight test engineer, I'm never the one at the controls of the experimental aircraft, but I'm typically the one backing up the pilot to help run the mission and keeping track of all those parameters that they can't see. Nowadays, whenever we go do our flight test, we have tons of data coming off the aircraft, from altitude, airspeed, G, to all the internal parameters that are going on. And it's the job of the flight test engineer to be monitoring those parameters real time. Leading up to that, we try to plan for every eventuality. So we look to see, is like, what if this component fails? What if that component fails? And we have a plan going forward. And as the mission conductor, as the flight test engineer, we're there backing up the pilot to run through any eventuality. And we typically have not just us in the control room, but we typically have a room of 30 to 40 brilliant engineers that know all of their specific subsystems down to a T. And we can help pull that information to help get the aircrew back on the ground if something bad happens. They are also there to make sure that we're getting the right data, that we're seeing the same things that we need to see, and go through the flight test and make sure that the system behaves as we expect it to.
So they have a syllabus they work through, whatever you guys agree to on the ground, go through the parameters, and hopefully everything works right. Hopefully. Now, we were out on the ramp today, and we saw a very cool airplane, the F-62. F-16 looks like an F-16, but and Greg got plenty of pictures of that, so we'll figure out how to work that in. But tell me about that airplane.
So the now X-62A started life as an F-16, and it has a history of risk reduction for advanced flight control technology. So we've tested initial versions of the F-22 control law, the F-35 control law, some adaptive flight control laws later on. And one of the neat things about it is it has what we like to call a safety envelope built into it. So it has a bunch of hardware and software safety sensors which detect if the airplane is going to get into a bad situation. So whether that's going to overload the surfaces, whether it's going to get into an unrecoverable attitude, those sensors are always running. And if the developmental control log gets put into a bad situation, the sensors trip off and we hand control back over to the safety pilot. Okay. Now, this aircraft is unique that it is a D model F-16, so it has two operators. It will always have two operators, but it's unique in that the aircraft commander and the safety pilot sits in the back seat. And so that is different from every F-16 out there. So as an flight test engineer, I actually sit in the front cockpit when we're running test missions on the X-62.
Wow, that's really cool.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but that's set up that way because we can test developmental flight control laws, and we give that view and that experience to the person who's actually evaluating the control law. So they are going to see if we developed a brand new plane, put in a new control law, we can evaluate that on Vista before that other new aircraft is even built.
So when we're talking about a control law, really what we're talking about in layman's terms is just flight control bumpers, right? The airplane won't do certain things based on however you've programmed it in.
Yeah, so the safety envelope keeps us within that nice safe region, but the flight control is whatever developmental flight control. Like if I wanted to go take the Boeing 787 flight control law, so the thing that makes it move, I can throw that in Vista because that's what it's designed for. I can also put a model of the 787 into Vista, so like a dynamics math model, and we can simulate, say, a 787 with their flight control system. So if I pull back on the stick, if I were sitting in a 787, this is going to replicate that exact dynamics and what I'm seeing to the pilot.
Now, the aircraft has data links.
It does.
My understanding with that is that you can update some of those parameters or some of that in the airplane in real time, right? Yeah, so we've added these data links because it helps improve the efficiency of flight test. So whereas a typical design of a control law is I'm running this on the ground, I'm simulating the response of the aircraft. If I didn't like what I saw, I tweak some gains, change it again, tweak some gains, change it again, and it's a very iterative process. Well, with Vista, we can actually do that in flight. So we can go run the maneuver, the evaluation pilot sitting in the front can say, I didn't like that. Can you tweak this parameter? Can you make it, a bit more responsive or a bit less responsive?
and we have the capability to change that in flight.
Now, my understanding is that's the only aircraft, if I got this right, the only aircraft, test evaluation aircraft that can do that right now. Is that true?
That is currently the only test and evaluation aircraft that can do that.
That is really neat. So now, do you sit up front, and if the pilot irritates you, you go, okay, I'm going to make it a little harder for him?
It's usually the safety pilot's the one doing that.
You don't have to admit that.
It usually is the other way around. So one of the cool things that we do for the student demo, so that's another unique thing about the X-62 is not only is it an experimental research aircraft, but it's part of the test pilot school curriculum.
Okay.
Because we show our students what the effect of changing different aspects of a control is in flight.
Right.
And we go all the way from taking a bare airframe F-16. So the F-16s are noticeable in their design that they're the, quote, relaxed stability.
Right.
So we will fly an unaugmented F-16. So the students will have direct control over the control surfaces, which in a normal F-16 is a horrible thing. It's statically unstable.
Right,
It will depart right away. Well, we can do that in Vista because we have our safety envelope. And so we showed the students, this is what a bare airframe F-16 looks like, and then we start adding our different control loops onto it to show this is how we add the desirable behavior of automatic flight control and digital flight control.
I think we've talked about it on the, we've done 162 of these videos, I forget how many, but almost all modern fighters essentially are, they're unstable.
Correct.
To a certain extent. And I've heard the F-16 is a real handful.
It can be. Because it was it wasn't necessarily the first one, but it was one of the early relaxed stability aircraft, because yes, it does make it more maneuverable, but you have to have a flight control system to compensate for it.
And when you get in that, have you been in the front cockpit?
Of the X-62, yeah.
What do you think? When you get in there?
The view's fantastic. So I'm envious of all of our student pilots that get to fly in the front seat all the time. The view's fantastic. The feeling is just like no other. Because as an engineer, we're typically in the rear cockpit of these fighter type aircraft. So just being able to be up there and just see everything is just awesome.
Where, Demon, now my understanding is you come out of the test pilot school, graduate school with a master's degree.
We do come out with a master's. So after that, I got assigned to Eglin Air Force Base where I did some weapons testing. But the flight control bug kind of still was biting at me, so I ended up going and getting my PhD in cooperative flight control.
Oh, wow.
And so going on and doing that, took me about 3 years to do. Then we came back here, and I was fortunate enough to get involved with the X-62 upgrade project, developing the new systems that we've installed on there, which the main new system is basically a set of mission computers which allow us to run autonomous algorithms. It's effectively additional computing power in order to do that kind of advanced computer processing.
What's the future for you? Where are you going? Where do you want to be?
So where do I want to be? So right now, I'm really still interested in being a squadron commander. And a test squadron commander at that. So I've been involved in test almost my entire career, and I just want to keep doing it. It's awesome. I love the academic community that I've gotten involved with doing my PhD. So that's a weird one of trying to sit between brand new cutting edge academic research and actual flight tests. There's usually a decent amount of separation because it goes from paper and then it takes at least a couple years to get to the actual aircraft. However, there's a couple unique organizations. I don't know, maybe NASA's in the future for me. There's a couple unique areas where PhD and flight tests kind of can marry up.
Well, very cool. Well, we're gonna keep an eye on you, and Demon, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
We appreciate it.
3, 2, 1, end of test. King with a go.